Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another Closer webinar. My name is Will Poynter and I'll be presenting. I'll just start in a minute, but before I get going, I'll just take care of a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to record this session and the recording will be made available later. So if you have to duck out for any reason, you won't miss out. And the presentation is going to be about 20 to 25 minutes long with a nice long section, 20 minutes or so, for questions at the end. Feel free to send your questions in the chat facility inside Blackboard, which I see some of you have already found, or send your questions via Twitter by sending them to @closer_UK. And also, I encourage you to send your questions in as soon as you think of them. Don't necessarily wait to the end. We'll be progressing through questions, starting with the earliest first. So get in where you can. Okay, so welcome to an introduction to Closer Discovery. I am just setting up my computer. Sorry. My name is Will Poynter, as I said. I'm the technical manager for Closer. And just to kick off, what is Closer for all of you out there that don't necessarily know Closer very well? It's a consortium project funded by the ESRC and MRC that consists of 8 of the UK longitudinal studies and the UK Data Service and the British Library. And our mission is to maximize the use, value, and impact of the UK's longitudinal studies. And we do this through a variety of different mechanisms, but our flagship product is Closer Discovery. So what is Closer Discovery? Closer Discovery has been described as in a multitude of different ways, in which the most common probably was Metadata Discovery Platform, but you may have heard any permutation of these words. They effectively all mean the same thing. My personal favorite these days is actually just to refer to it as a search engine. All of these tools mean exactly the same thing. And if you ever hear of a data discovery platform or a uniform discovery portal, it also always means search engine. So just to go back for a second, I want to focus on this word metadata because sometimes this can cause a little bit of confusion as to exactly what we mean. In my time at Closer, I have recruited dozens of metadata members of staff who focus on the metadata work for discovery, and I've always asked them this question: what do you understand by the term metadata? And undoubtedly, I almost always got the same answer, which was a pretty good dictionary definition: data about data. But the only problem with data about data is it doesn't necessarily mean a lot unless you really understand data and metadata already. So my way of interpreting metadata is, what is the difference between data and information? The difference between data and information is context. What provides data context? Metadata. So therefore, we can create a formula which is metadata plus data equals information. By having metadata, you give your data context and you turn your data into usable information. Let me give you an example. So here we've got a collection of data: brown 42, 175, green very handsome. Seems vaguely like a dating profile to me. But without the metadata, it's kind of hard to know what that means. I mean, that's probably, hair color or eye color. It's probably 42 is age and so on. But now if we apply some metadata in the form of columns, we actually find out the brown was eye color, the 42 was actually shoe size, it wasn't age, and then 175 was height. And this already gives our data more context. It's more usable, more understandable. But we're not quite done yet, because what the height of 175, what unit is that? What 175? And also, a shoe size of 42 in UK is very, very big. I mean, this person is a giant. But by applying another type of metadata, units in this case, we can actually see that the units for height is centimeters, which makes that a fairly average height. And the unit being used for shoe size is Paris points, but often referred to as the EU shoe size. So Closer Discovery, as I've mentioned, is a search engine. for the discovery of metadata about UK longitudinal studies. It uses throughout international standards to carry out its work, and this is very important. The reason we use international standards such as DDI lifecycle and various ISO standards is to create comparable and consistent metadata, which allows us to share it and work with other organizations. It also provides a certain level of enhanced searchability. It does this through a range of different ways, but two of the key ways, which I will be able to show you today, are through topics and life stages, in which a great deal of manual documenting and archiving work has gone into implementing these. So, to get straight onto it, welcome to Closer Discovery. Now, I know a lot of you will have already looked at it, but also in the last few weeks, it's gone through a little bit of a facelift, so you might find it looks a little bit different. And to kick off with, we're going to use this widget that exists on the front page for getting started with the search. And to begin with, we can search via a multitude of different item types, but we're going to search via search using variables, as this is something that people are most familiar with. We can click on this studies option and select the studies that we may want to search. So you can see all 8 of the studies that are part of Closer Discovery are listed here. I've already pre-selected the 4 UK national birth cohorts, and which we'll do just for this example search. And then we can select the life stages in which we're interested in, as I just mentioned. So this is the stage the cohort member is through their life, essentially. So pregnancy is around the sort of 0 to 6 month mark of a cohort member's life. And then we've also selected early years and childhood. The exact definitions of these life stages are publicly available on the Closer website if you'd like to check them for your use. So we'll select the first 3 life stages here. And then for a keyword search or a search query, I'm going to look for special education needs. Just let it load for a second. And hopefully the font is not too small on your screens. And you can see that we've got 9 results from the variety of studies and at these life stages relating to special education needs. I'm just going to try and highlight that although I searched for special education needs, it has also returned results, if you look at the first result, for special educational needs, meaning you don't have to get the exact words. We do a certain level of what we call stemming, which means that every version of the word, every conjugation will be searched. Now, so 9 results seems a little bit low to me, and actually that's probably because, as a lot of you will know, special education needs is also referred to as SEN, S-E-N. So I'm just going to improve our search very slightly by adding in a search for either special education needs or SEN. When I do this, hopefully, yes, our results go up to 24. Now that seems a lot more sensible to me. And this way you can start to capture all of the variables that may be of interest to your research. Just before we go too far into discovery, I just want to take it back and we'll go back to the home page and we'll do another search before we, this time including all of the Closer studies. And instead of focusing on the early life stages where things like special educational needs are most are more likely research, we'll go for a more, let's say, mature area of research. Let's go for alcohol. Hopefully not too many searches for early years in alcohol, but perhaps. So now we've got, hopefully you can see that we've got 38 results here. And I'm going to scroll down until I can find a variable that demonstrates this well. But we, Discovery doesn't only search by variable labels, which is typically all that's provided via things like data dictionaries. If you can see the variable where my cursor is right now, the variable label is fairly unhelpful. It says derived audit PC group. Just below that, you see that it says alcohol consumption, and it's highlighted the alcohol in yellow. That is because the topic that was applied to this variable is alcohol consumption. So in every previous data dictionary that I've seen and search tools, you wouldn't be able to get this level of keyword searching, that it's searching also the topics and therefore the variables that apply to those topics. So here it's found this alcohol, this variable that relates to alcohol that didn't have the word alcohol anywhere inside it, anywhere in its label, sorry. Also, if I click through this through to this variable, now we can see what it actually looks like to browse a variable itself rather than just search results. And we're presented with this screen. We get the variable name, we get the variable label, which we could see in the previous screen. We also know which data set it belongs to, which is from the British cohort study sweep 9 self-completion. And we also get a frequency chart showing the number of invalid responses, but also the valid responses and their coding. So we've got a code value of 1 for unproblematic drinking and a code value 2 for increasing or higher risk of drinking. Now, I would like to show you how we find how this variable was created, what went into recording this variable. And if you go to this link at the top, lineage, we can actually see all of the constituent parts that have made this variable. Now, I understand that this screen may seem a little overwhelming to begin with, but I will break it down. If you see the 5 most inner sections, which appear blue on my screen, but I do understand they appear slightly different colors in different screens, these are the questions that were asked that led to the makeup of this variable. So we see question 32 at the top there. How often do you have a drink containing alcohol? The boxes just above each one of these blue boxes and these gray boxes are the variables that were collected and recorded from those questions collected. So you see that the question 32, how often do you have a drink containing alcohol, led to the variable frequency of having alcoholic drink, which makes a lot of sense. Now, if we go one level again to where the variable name is BD9 audit, total audit PC score, this variable is a derived variable, and it is the total score created by adding these other variables together that are below it. And finally, if we go one more step up to right at the top, the audit PC group, the variable that we actually came in by, is essentially a second order derived variable. It's been derived from a derived variable, and it is the grouping of the score. So we saw a moment ago, it was grouped into unproblematic and higher risk. That is the grouping of the score in which is placed just below it. Now, if we were to want to find out more about the questions that make up this variable, I can click through to question 32. And now we can see the question view. So this is the question that was asked of the respondents. And you see the question text, how often do you have a drink containing alcohol? If there were any instructions given to the respondent, like please tick one box, that'd also be presented here. And we also see lower down that the multiple choice options that were presented to the respondent. We can see that the options are 1, never, 2, monthly or less, 3, 2 to 4 times a month, 4, 2 to 3 times a week, and 5, 4 or more times a week. I will give you all a moment just to consider which group you might be in. Okay, so now you've got that in your mind, let's go through to related variables. Here, it's essentially we're looking at the situation from the other perspective. And now we can see the variables that relate to a question rather than the question that relates to the variables. If you are in any way, it's hard to see the distinction perhaps between questions and variables, which we've seen sometimes. Think of a question as an input and a variable as an output. A question is asked and then data is made available via a variable. And here at the top, we have the variable collected from that response. So if you answered 4, 2 to 3 times a week, you're in good company. There's plenty of people in that category. So this gives researchers some real-time information about the data they may be interested in, including valid responses, invalid responses, and a frequency chart showing the data that they may find, that they will find, in fact. Now, if I move back to the question view, and if we scroll down to this bottom section, which I didn't talk about previously, we get to see that this question was part of the age 42 self-completion questionnaire. It also provides us a view with the previous question and the subsequent question, which can give us a bit of information as to why people may have responded in such a way, or if there was a filter or a condition that may have removed certain people or certain responses. I'm actually not going to click through this link right now. Instead, I'm going to show you a whole other way to find questionnaires. So if we return back to the home page very quickly, and once that loads, and on the right-hand side there, you can see we've got these, at the bottom, we've got these item types for various different item types in Discovery that you can browse by. But right now, we're going to focus on questionnaires. So it tells us there's 191 questionnaires in Discovery at the moment. And if we click through, we'll get a list of all of these 191 questionnaires that are available. So if I wanted to find that questionnaire that I was just looking, that I just had the link to, the age 42 self-completion for the 1970 birth cohort, British birth cohort, I can use the filters on the left-hand side to start to reduce down my results. So by selecting 1970 British cohort study, and then clicking refine, I can reduce the results down to currently the 18 questions that are available in Discovery from this study. As I scroll down, I should be able to find, oh yes, I can see it, the age 42 self-completion questionnaire. So when I click on this link, this is exactly what you would have seen if we had clicked on the other link a minute ago. But this is another way to find this information, depending on where your starting point is. So now we're viewing the questionnaire. This is what we call the flowchart view, and essentially a dedicated team for the last 3 years has put in a lot of effort in making sure that they've documented all of the data collection instruments, all the questionnaires that have been into the field as accurate as possible, including statements, as we can see right there. We have the title that was on the front page. We say it's a self-completion questionnaire. This was all because this was actually written on the document. We put in the sequences, we put in the filters, we put in the routing, we put in everything that we can. And you can also see, at the top of the screen, we have what we call a breadcrumb. This shows us essentially where we are positioned within a study and in a sweep. So at the moment, you can see that we're in the 1970 British cohort study, and we're in the age 42 survey, 2012. At any time, we can click through here, and we will return back to the top level, to the study, where we can find out a lot of useful information about the study. Here, it's easy to see the abstract, who the principal investigator is, and who owns the rights and who publishes the data for the study. If we click on the second tab, sweeps, we should see that we get the list of all the sweeps that the 1970 study has conducted, and if we click through, or click on the age 10, the 1980 sweep, we yet again get the title of the sweep, the alternative title of the sweep, who the principal investigator was at the time. So before we saw the principal investigator of the study currently, but for each one of the sweeps we see it at the time, the publisher at the time, abstract, and various other pieces of useful information. If we click onto the coverage tab, we see where also this sweep covers. Not surprisingly, it covers the dates 1980. For some of the more modern stuff, we would have specific dates it went into the field and came out of the field. And it also tells us some of the geographical information of this study, and which areas were included. If we move along to the funding tab, we can find out which organizations funded the research, which can be very important. And now, if we move along to the data tab, we can see the data files that have been made available from the data collected, and the data collections that occurred that made up this sweep, so the various questionnaires that were used. If I go click on the educational score form data collection, which is one of my particular interest, we can actually see that this the data was collected between the dates of 1980 and 1981. It's very specific information, and we can see the mode of collection. Essentially, was a knowledge-based assessment and a personality traits assessment. And we can also see the collection organization, who was involved with collecting the information. If we click through to the instrument itself, we'll get a flowchart view, just like we got before for the age 42 one. When it loads, there we go. And if we start to open up this flowchart view, we will get to see the questions that make it up, that comprise the questionnaire. If I continue to scroll down, these are all statements and sequences in yellow. And if I click on, for instance, question 2, playground, if we look at this right now, we see that this is a score. It was in a sequence called score sheet for Chair's pictorial language comprehension test. And the only question text we've been given is playground, which is not particularly helpful. But if we click through, and then we get to view the question, we don't actually at this page get much more information. We know it's question 2, and we know its question text is playground, but its multiple choice options are a bit obscure. Upper left, upper right, lower left, and lower right. But if we click on the external aids tab, we can actually see that what was given to the cohort members was this image. The cohort members were asked to select which of these images was correct for the word playground. This is a level of information that has not yet existed in documentation terms, actually providing the images that were used in a search engine. Following on from that, if just as we did before, we go up to related variables, we can see the variable that was collected is essentially this vocab test, and the label is playground. We see that thankfully most of the children recognized the playground at age 10. With of the nearly 13,000 valid responses, nearly 13,000 of them got it correct, which is good news. And we can see also, these sort of things can provide useful information for the fact that the code value 3, incorrect bottom left, has got 0. That's because it's impossible to have answered both bottom left and incorrectly, because that was the correct response. Now, I just want to show you one last thing before I open this up to questions, maybe 2 things. If we click on Explore on the main menu, we're presented with this screen where we have a list of all topics that Closer Discovery uses. We have our level 1 topics, in which I can see is sort of healthcare and health behavior. And then inside a level 1 topic, let's say education, this example, we have our level 2 topics that get more specific. So I've clicked on qualifications, and we now see all of the variables that have been entered into Closer Discovery that have got the topic qualifications. Using the buttons at the top, we could instead look at questions, and we could filter this. If we again just want to look at a specific study or a specific life stage, we could focus our exploration. If I click on a variable, it should load in the right-hand panel, giving us quite a quick view to browse around. Variables that may be of interest to our research. This is a variable for age mother left school, and we can see that it's a numeric response. There are invalids that were coded up. These are the negative ones that you see in the frequency chart, but we also see as a numeric response with a minimum of 1, a maximum of 25, and a mean of 15.35. If I were to click on these black plus signs that appear in the variable list, we are able to add variables to lists. Now, lists can be thought of as a sort of a favorites device, like we have in our browser. By clicking these pluses, you may have noticed on the left-hand side of the screen, the list has now gone from 0 to 3. If I click through that, we can see this list, and we can see the 3 variables that I clicked plus on just a moment ago. So several expected use cases for this may include variables of interest for you that you may want to come back to another time, variables you might want to share with other people, or a variety of different things. So if you click rename, we can actually name this list, so it is easier to manage multiple lists, and also so you know exactly what the contents of the list is. So in this case, these are education variables, so I've given it quite the simple name of my education variable list. Not very imaginative, I must admit. So I rename that list, and now if we look on the left-hand side, the list is called my education variable list. So we can create as many lists, you can create as many lists as you like, and you can name them in it whatever way you like. And if you have a user account, these are saved to your user account. If you don't have a user account, just a forewarning, they are saved in your cookies, and therefore, if you move to a different computer, you may not have them. Finally, I just want to show you that if you want to take these variables away and use them, or if you want to perhaps ask various studies to use their data and you want to provide them with a list of variables that you're interested in, you can click on the download PDF button on the list page, and what you should get is a PDF like this one, which has a list of all variables that you put into your list. It gives you the label, it gives you the source question, so you've got a bit more contextual information. It's in the case of data sets that have been deposited in the UK data service, it also provides you with a DOI link to exactly where that data set is provided, and it also provides you with some summary statistics. So that is all for my sort of light speed demonstration of closest discovery. I just want to cover where we're going next, because there is always things happening with closest discovery. We do an update every month. There is always new content coming available every month as we deposit more and more of these studies into the search engine. We're also adding in new functionality all the time. The piece of functionality that is just around the corner, and hopefully we're released within the next 6 weeks, is that we're now adding PDFs to Close Discovery, so it's easier to browse the original PDFs which people use for research. Just to give you an example, that's what the development of version of Close Discovery currently looks like. So in that A42 questionnaire we looked at, not only do you have the flowchart view, which I showed you, you'll also have this tab PDF where you can actually view the PDF that was sent out. And we are, as I say, we're always adding more functionality. This is something that we're very excited about, and we're putting a lot of work into. A piece of work we call equivalencies, where we will be able to show in Discovery where there are similar variables, both longitudinally through studies and across studies. An easy example would be if you found the obesity variable in one study, and you might want to know, not the obesity variable, sorry, the weight variable or the BMI variable in one study, and you want to know where that variable was in the other studies or in other age groups, it would provide you essentially with a list of related variables or suggested variables. I tend to think of it a bit like on Amazon, where people that bought this also bought that. That would be that sort of functionality. And it would be remiss not to mention there is also, constant bug fixes going on with Close Discovery. We're always developing it, we're always improving it, and to that end, I would very much like to hear any feedback people have over things they like, things that they've spotted that don't work, or things that they think can be improved on, in which you can all get in touch by emailing either myself directly or closer@ucl.ac.uk. We're also available on Twitter. And so you're able to check out the tool and all our variable resources. I've put up the 3 most key web addresses for understanding discovery and closer.